Hello, everyone, and welcome to day 3 of the Wine.com Day webinar series. We are really excited to kick off this webinar with Maisons, Marques, and Domaine. We still have a few folks trickling in here, so we will give them one more minute and then we will kick off. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Again, thank you so much for joining us on day 3 of the Wine.com Day webinar series. I hope everybody enjoyed our first 2 days with Wilson Daniels and Winebow. Today we have a really exciting lineup for you from Maisons, Marques, and Domaine. We have Jean-Rémi Barbier as a representative. He shares a ton of great insight into MMD's portfolio, their connection to Roederer, the champagne house, and a ton more. And then we have 3 great producers we're featuring today, including Domaine Ott, Roederer Estate, and Ramos Pinto. Each of them basically an all-star in their fields, and it was really exciting to kind of dig in a little bit more and learn about what makes each of their wineries so special and why they're so respected across the globe. So for a little bit more about the portfolio as a whole and the producers, here is Jean-Rémi Barbier from Maisons, Marques, and Domaine. Hi, Jean-Rémi. Thanks so much for joining today.
Ideally, thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, we're really excited to dive in more into Maison, Marques, and Domaine, your portfolio, and the 3 excellent producers we have today. But before we get to the producers, could you share a little bit more about the ethos and philosophy behind your excellent portfolio?
Absolutely. Well, first, let me explain what is Maison Marques and Domaine, or also MMD, which was founded in 1987. It was originally founded as the US sales and marketing arm for Champagne Louis Roederer, and also the sister winery, Roederer Estate in California. Over the years, Champagne Louis Roederer acquired some other properties that are now part of Roederer collection, in France, Portugal, also in California. So that includes all those properties, as well as some family-owned wineries from Spain, Italy as well. So total, we cover 30 wineries from 7 countries, from the world great wine regions.
Yeah, I think you guys have carefully curated a fantastic group of some of the top names and some of the folks that you would think of, one of the first names that come to mind in each area. Before we dive in a little bit into the producers themselves, could you share a little bit more about maybe that the Roederer connection or how the mindset of the Roederer company, as a champagne house, they like to own more of their vineyards, for example, than most champagne houses. How does that kind of ethos trickle into the companies that you want to work with and the producers you work with?
Absolutely. Well, Champagne Roederer remains one of the very last few independent and family-owned houses of Champagne. Very rare. And the idea of the Roederer collection is to have a collection of family-owned properties, estate-driven wineries as well, with a long-term vision rather than just like chasing any trends or building a collection of like commercial brand. This is not what we're doing. So every acquisition, every winery represents something, parts of the Champagne Louis Roederer philosophy as well. And obviously, I forgot to mention that sustainability is key as well. In fact, Champagne Louis Roederer is the largest biodynamic vineyard of Champagne. More recently, this is actually very exciting. We got the official news last week, but part of Roederer collection now, there is Domaine Pierre Damois in Gevrey-Chambertin. So that was a purchase recently made that got official a few days ago. So very excited to now include Burgundy, part of the portfolio, and this is such an acquisition on a milestone year, because this year we celebrate 250th anniversary at Champagne Louis Roederer, founded in 1776, as well as the 150th anniversary of Cristal.
Wow, that's very exciting. Should we dive into the producers? All right, let's kick off with Domaine Ott. Can you share a little bit more about Domaine Ott before we jump into our interview?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Domaine Ott's fantastic properties, 3 properties, in fact, in Provence, 2 in Côtes de Provence, 1 in Bandol. I was recently actually with Jean-François at the properties. We had an amazing tours visiting like each wineries and better understanding like the diversity, the identity behind each property. That was fascinating. And in fact, it was during the heat wave as well in France, so it was quite hot. So it was great to sip some rosé every couple hours.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I've only been able to go to Bandol. I haven't been able to see the rest of their properties, so I'm jealous. But all right, well, to learn a little bit more, let's hear directly from Jean-François himself. Here is our interview with Jean-François Ott. All right. Hi, Jean-François. Thanks so much for joining us for Wine.com Day.
Thank you.
Yeah. So excited. All right. We'll kick right off here. First question for you. Where are you located and what varieties do you work with?
Just now, I'm located in Château Romassan in Bandol appellation, but that you can see behind me. But we are located in Provence, south of France, really by the French Riviera. And we have 3 different estates. The first one was Château de Selle in Terroir, about, I would say, 50 kilometers from Saint-Tropez. Clos Mireille, which is by the sea, really on the Côte d'Azur. And the last one is Château Romassan. Château Romassan is around 40 kilometers from Marseille, still really close to the sea. Yeah.
Awesome. And then how do the varieties break down between the 3 estates?
Alors, for the variety, our main variety is Grenache. Then I would say Cinsault, Grenache Cinsault. And we also grow a lot of Mourvèdre in our estate in Bandol and a little bit of Syrah. That's for rosé wine. And for white, we grow mainly Sémillon and Rolle, Vermentino.
Fantastic. All right, next question. If someone has never heard of your winery before, what's the first thing you would want them to know about Domaine Ott?
I want them to know that my family was really one of the first to make high-end rosé. And we still work on that from vintage to vintage. That means that we try to improve the quality and we take the rosé really seriously. We want it to be like a vin de terroir. That's why we have 3 different rosé coming from 3 different estates. And obviously our first goal is to get the best ingredients. That means that I would say 85% of our job is outside making the grapes. So we are really I really want to make haute couture. Does it sound good for you? Haute couture? Haute couture rosé wine in south of France. And that's our goal. That has been our goal since the beginning. And I still, again, try to improve from vintage to vintage, really.
That
So
makes
our
sense.
production at the end, even if we are known for not known a little bit for the quality of our rosé, it's not because we make a lot of rosé. Our production is pretty small, but at the end, I want this production to be the best, for sure.
Awesome. And this isn't a question that other producers will get, but I think we need to touch on it. Can you tell us a little bit about the background of your iconic bottle as well, please?
So this bottle, you want to know the story about the shape?
Yes.
So my family was struggling to get some, in Provence, at the beginning of, in 1896, Provence was not really known as a wine region. So they were struggling to get some to be known a little bit more, and they tried to have the AOC in Provence, but they were struggling against the government to get it. And finally, my family said, "Okay, in Champagne they have a shape of bottle. In Burgundy they have one. In Alsace they have one. We need a bottle shape for Provence wine." So the brother of my grandfather designed this bottle. It was like a Greek amphora at the beginning. That was what he had in mind, and he decided to find a supplier to. After the design, he found a supplier to make it really. So it was really a long process. And when he went to his colleagues in south of France, in Provence, saying, "Guys, we can all use this bottle," the price was like 2 or 3 times more than a regular bottle. So they said no. So he got upset a little bit, and he said, "Okay, if you don't want it, I'm going to keep it for myself forever." And since then, it's our bottle. So today it's registered everywhere, and it's our bottle. And if you see this bottle, you are sure that it's our wine, our Domaine Ott wine, for sure.
Awesome. Is it actually based on an artifact found on one of the properties?
Yeah, no, actually, it was really. I think he had in mind the fact that the Greek were storing the wine in that shape of bottle, and also he wanted something that remind the Provence, and I don't know this tree, which is a cypress. We say cypress in French, and so yeah, everything was. He had that in everything of all those points in mind, and he finally designed this one. And at the beginning, it was really easy to decide to design on a paper, but then he had to make a shape really out of it. So he made the shape in wood. That is funny because we still have those wood shape in our estate in Clos Mireille, and yeah, it was a long process again because at this time it was difficult to find a supplier that was able to make this exact shape. So it took about maybe 5 or 6 years, and they finally ended in the 30s with this bottle, and since then it's ours. Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, I guess the other part is just a myth. Great. Well, then next question. So moving into the winery, is there a distinct style or approach you guys take to make the quality or style of wine that you guys have, or does it vary property by property, or is there something you kind of have like a blanket ethos across all of the wineries?
I really feel that I try to work on each estate the same way, farming the same way. Obviously, we need to adapt a little bit because obviously the terroir are not exactly the same, but and the type of grapes are not the same. But I really try to be consistent on the way we farm and the way we make the vinification. But at the same time, I think it's a good way also to make people understand what differences are between the 3 estates that we have and the 3 different terroirs that we are on. And that's really important for me. So I would say that they are really different, really. Château de Selle is really the finesse, Clos Mireille is more crispy, and Château Romassan, it's a little bit more the gastronomic way of rosé. That means that you need to, not you don't need to, but I always feel it's better when it's a little bit older and when you have a lunch, a dinner or lunch with it, with food anyway. And at the end, it's made the same way, but that's also make the richness of our production. And I think, it's pretty much like a chef making three different meals. You can feel that it's the same guy that make it, that cooked, but at the end, obviously, the tastes are different.
Yeah. No, that makes a ton of sense. And if our viewers want to go check out you tasting one of those older Romassan rosés, we also, a friend of Wine.com, V is for Vino, has a great episode where Jean-François and him tasted 2009, I believe, and it looked fantastic. So that is very cool. Next question I have for you: if you were trying to highlight a wine that was not one of your most famous or the most maybe not most sought after, but the most well known, is there a wine in your portfolio that you wish more folks would try more often? It's one of your favorites and not enough people are trying it in your mind?
I think it's about, sometimes during the year or during my life. I mean, I've been working in 2000 a lot on white wine. Today, I'm focused on the red wine from Bandol because I feel that Bandol is really underrated in the world. And it's one of the best appellations in France. And I feel we have a lot to express with the red, with the rosé. So we work hard on it, but obviously our DNA is on rosé wine. I would love to tell you that I drink Étoile more than all the others because it's my flagship, but it really depends on on what I do. If it's before meal, if it's in the afternoon, or if it's during the dinner, I shouldn't say that, but I will anyway. Thinking about wine really, and wine lovers that obviously I like Château Romassan really, really, really much because I feel so. It's really always very not difficult but challenging anyway to make to stay on the perfect balance with Mourvèdre for rosé wine, and so it's a lot of efforts, I would say, but at the end I always feel it's you got everything. It's fresh, it's fruity, you get nice acidity, and at the same time you get the length, you get the texture. You can have it for a meal, for lunch, for dinner, for before meal. So it's pretty much like the couteau suisse. I don't know if you say that, but it can go with everything. I feel it's really very special to make. And again, this appellation in Bandol is so, at the same time, it's so small and it's so diverse that the result is always really, really nice.
Awesome. Yeah. And that's the beauty of your guys' portfolio too, is there is something for everyone, so everybody can find whichever wine best fits their taste, even if it is a white or red for that matter. Could you tell us a little bit about recent vintages? I think we mostly have on the platform or on wine.com right now 2025. Can you tell us maybe a little bit about maybe 2024, 2025, and what the growing conditions were like?
I can tell you that 2025 2025 was a little bit challenging, maybe like 2026, because we had a heat in June, really hot temperature during a week in June and another week in August. So that means that we had to be pretty fast on the harvesting. We harvest everything by hand. So we sort a lot in the vineyard to make sure that we have only the best grapes in the winery. Yeah, it was tough because of the heat. Working outside when it's 45 degrees Celsius is always a pain. But we kept the acidity, the freshness, and we managed not to go really high in the alcohol degrees, which was a good one, really. It was challenging, but at the end, it was a really good one, a good vintage. And 24 maybe was one of the easiest I had in 25 years. That means that everything was pretty much perfect. So the temperature, we had rain during winter, we had nice weather. The weather was the spring. Spring was a little bit challenging also because of humidity and everything, but we get through it. And at the end, it was a really good vintage. And the balance at the end is really perfect. And that means that 25, 24, even 23 were some vintages that, I know that they can be drunk from the time we launched, but after 5, 6, or 7 years, they are going to keep this acidity and to keep this freshness. So I think, yeah, they are really, the balance was really good. So when at the beginning the balance is good, you know that you can keep those wines, and the taste will be always really good after 5 or 6 years. So.
Yeah, for sure. Fantastic. All right, last question here. I wanted to ask about a vintage throughout your whole life that has stood out to you, whether it's good or bad, but what is one of the most memorable, and it can be a couple, but most memorable vintages for you?
I want to tell you 24 because, again, it was an easy one, but to tell you the truth, the one I have in mind is 22. 2002, because it was my first one. And at this time, I didn't charge Château de Selle. This vintage was really challenging. We had rain from the beginning. From the end of August until mid-September. That means that we had to sort a lot. We had to work a lot in the vineyard to make sure that what we get in the winery was the quality was good enough. It was really challenging, really stressful. And at the end, the production was 40% less than 2001. And so the result was not, the number of bottles was really bad, but the quality is still really good. So it was tough, but I think it was a really good way for me to learn that if we want to be consistent on the quality, we need to sort, we need to make sure that we have only the best grapes. And no matter really the volume at the end, what's important is to keep the quality. And you know what? If we are not good on one vintage, it's okay. We are going to be good the next vintage or the vintage after. And obviously, hopefully for us, we don't have those kind of bad climate in south of France so often. So yeah, 2002 was for me was He's the one that I have in mind every time because it was tough, but at the end, I really love the result of the taste of this vintage. So
Yeah,
you never know.
perfect introduction, a trial by fire. Thank you so much. This has been great. Thank you so much for joining us for the webinar today.
Thank you very much. And I don't know if you happen to come to south of France, you know that we have 3 estates, and you can come and have a look and see exactly what we do.
All right, that was our conversation with Jean-François Ott. I hope everybody learned a little bit more about Domaine Ott that they might not have known before, and a little bit more about Provence. Let's move over now to Portugal and talk about Ramos Pinto. Can you share a little bit, anything about them, Jean-Rémi?
Yeah, well, absolutely. Quite another outstanding properties part of Roederer collection. That was also the first acquisition from Roederer collection in 1990. But obviously, like the roots dates back from 1880 when the brothers Adriano and Antonio Ramos Pinto established the properties. Beautiful wine. We always think of ports as, Douro Valley as fortified wine, as ports. Rarely, we feature as well the still wine, or also like hidden gem, in my opinion. But also like this is beautiful vineyard. The landscape there are quite unique. And Ramos Pinto is 4 quintas located in the Douro Superior. Beautiful.
Great. Well, without any more introduction, here is Jorge Rosas from Ramos Pinto. All right, we are here with Jorge Rosas from Ramos Pinto. Thanks so much for joining the Wine.com Day webinar.
Well, thank you for having me, Billy. It's a great pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited for you to share the background of your wines and your region with our listeners. So let's start off right off the bat. Where are you located, and what varieties do you guys work with?
So at the moment, I'm here in Porto, more precisely in Vila Nova de Gaia, in our head offices. It's a 300-year-old building where we have we age our ports. And then if you go further east, so upstream, we have 4 quintas in the Douro Valley, 2 in the sub-region of the Cimacor, which is the central area, and 2 others in the Douro Superior, which is the eastern part of the Douro Valley. So we are located in the north of Portugal. Portugal is in the southwest of Europe. So we are lucky to have a wonderful climate here in Portugal.
Yes, and then when it comes to the varieties, I know there can be a ton of varieties used in port, but your family in particular has done some work to identify some of the top tier wines, or the varieties, sorry.
Yeah, well, Portugal has 250 indigenous grapes. Approximately 120 of these can be found in the Douro Valley. And we work with more than 60 varieties. We still have very old vines. Actually, we have a vine which has about 8 acres with 63 grape varieties. So it's a field blend. But my family, actually, my father started a scientific study in order to select the best grapes in the Douro Valley, the best indigenous, autochthonous grapes. And we have selected 5 that became the official recommended grapes that everybody else in the Douro is planting now. So these 5 are Touriga Nacional, Touriga Franca, Roriz, Barroca, and Tintucão. I know that they have difficult names to pronounce, but they are 100% Portuguese. Here in Portugal, we think more about the place and less about grape varieties. It's a bit like Bordeaux. We think about the region and not grape varieties. But we do have 120 grape varieties, which is much more than any region, any wine district in France or Italy or whatever.
Yeah, and I'm going to skip ahead to a question just based on when you're talking about the similarities to Bordeaux. Blending is a very important part of port, and I would love for you to share a little bit about some of your wines are actually blended with wines from 3 different centuries. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, we say that it's at Ramos Pinto, blending is more than a science; it's an art. It's the art of blending. Actually, we have a wooden structure with half bottles, 370 ml bottles, with all the wines that we have in stock. And when my cousin Anna wants to do a blend, she takes one bottle here, one bottle there, and she makes with different notes a music. It can be a rock and roll, or it can be a classic music, but she has to do always the same 10-year-old Tawny or the same 20-year-old Tawny with different vintages. So it's very difficult exercise because the wine has to be good. It has to have consistency in time. And that's why one of the reasons why we use very old vintages that were made by my great-great-grandfather and by his sons to give this continuity in style. So this is really a unique thing, you know, of 20-year-old Tawny, 30-year-old Tawny. Took our family 5 generations to make this wine. So how many products do you know that took 5 generations to make? It's a bit crazy, but we are a bit crazy.
Yeah, I mean that's amazing, and I don't think there are many port houses that can claim that as well. On to the next question. If somebody was just hearing about Ramos Pinto for the first time, what would you want them to know?
Yeah, well, we are a boutique winery. I would say state fruit. We are the only estate from all the main brands. We are the only estate fruit port, which is, I think, very important because when you count, there's 17,000 vine growers in the Douro. And it's very difficult to control the quality of 17,000. Well, one vine grower may have more than one plot. So it's very difficult to control. So we believe that the only way to do exceptional wines is to produce exceptional grapes. And the only way to produce exceptional grapes is to own your own vineyard. So Ramos Pinto owns about 615 acres across 4 quintas, Quinta de Bom Retiro, Ortiga, Monzage, and Erva Moura. And this ownership allow us to maintain a complete control over every stage of production process, from the vineyard management to the final blend. So as I said, we believe that exceptional wines can only be made from exceptional grapes. It's a La Palisse truth, but we are still old-fashioned and believe in that idea that the best way to ensure highest quality is to own and carefully manage our vineyards ourselves.
Yeah, fantastic. And then on that same note, you have a little bit of wine for everyone. Basically, you have styles across the board. Can you just share a little quick overview of the range of wines you make? And then I would love to talk about the recent vintage declaration as well.
Yeah, so 2 categories. One, Douro wines, DOC Douro wine, Denominação de Origem Controlada Douro, which is our still wines made with the same grapes, grape varieties that we use for port. So we, in the Douro wines, we do a white called Duas Quintas. Duas Quintas in Portuguese means 2 estates. It's a blend from 2 different estates that we own in the Douro Superior. So we have the Duas Quintas white and the Duas Quintas red, which is a great value for money, for great value. People are very surprised to see the quality of this wine for the price point. The Douro wines, and for port, we have tawny ports, so wood ports that are aged in port pipes, in port barrels, 550-liter barrels. So in our range, we have entry-level ports, tawny ports. So standard tawny, 8-year-old tawny port called Adriano. Then we produce 10, 20, and 30-year-old tawny. And very soon we will release a 50-year-old tawny port. These are incredible wines. Ramos Pinto is very famous for our tawny ports. I don't want to seem pretentious, but many say that Ramos Pinto tawnies are the best on the market. As I said before, we use in these blends of very old tawnies wines that were made by my great-grandfather and by my grand-uncle, and so it took 5 generations for our family to make these wines, aged tawny ports. And then you have another family of ports, which are the ruby family, so those who have a deeper color. And the rubies have more red fruit. You will find more red fruit, black currant, but black fruit and red fruit, berries, a lot of berries. And on the other hand, in the tawnies, you have more dry fruits, dry figs, dry apricots, almonds, nuts. So 2 totally different wines made with the same grapes, but it's only the aging that is different. The aging process is different. And so in the ruby family, you have a standard ruby, which Ramos Pinto has 3-4 years old in average. Then we have our collector, which is a reserve ruby. And then we have our late bottle vintage and the vintage. So let's say vintage is the best of the best. We only produce in very special years, in the best years. And when the wine is good, but not necessarily exceptional, we age it for 2 more years. So vintage port is bottled at 2nd year. But if we decide not to declare vintage port, we age it for 2 extra years, so 4 years. And then we bottle and we call it late bottle vintage. So if you compare with Bordeaux, we would say that vintage is the first growth and the LBV would be the younger brother, the second growth, I'd say, put it that way. So that's the family of ruby ports. And some people say vintage port, well, especially the British say that vintage port is king of ports. I like to say tawny ports are the queen of ports. They are both extraordinary and they are made to be drank in different moments. Vintage port, traditionally, people love it with cheese. It's very good with blue cheese like Stilton or Gorgonzola. Here in Portugal, we like very much vintage port with our famous Serra, which is a Portuguese cheese that made from sheep, and it's delicious with the cheese. Vintage port can be also great by its own. These are extraordinary wines.
And you were saying previously that you also enjoyed tawny ports by the pool or even after water skiing. They're perfect as an ice cold.
Chilled, always chilled. I always have a bottle of tawny port in the door of my fridge. And I lived for 3 years in France. And at that time, the oldest woman on earth was a French woman called Madame Jeanne Calment. And the French television did an interview and asked her, what's the secret of your longevity? And she said, I don't have any secrets, but I do drink a glass of port every night before I go to bed. So that's what I do. A small glass of port, tiny glass of port before I go to bed. But always chilled. And it's delicious in the summertime near the pool or after my water skiing in the Douro Valley.
Fantastic. Well, One last piece before we go. I can't let you leave without talking about the 2024 vintage, which has just been declared. Can you share us a little bit of detail about that wine?
Yeah, 2024 is for me the 21st century vintage port. It's a wine that is ready to drink now, with a lot of fruit. In aroma, you have a lot of violet, and also there's in our vintage, especially Erva Moira, there is a typical aroma in the Ramos Pinto vintage port called Esteva. Esteva is a bush that grows in wild in the Douro Valley, that has a white flower. The flower doesn't smell, but the leaf, during the flowering season of the vineyard, the leaf secretes a resin that it's absorbed by the vines. And you can feel that aroma in our Erva Moira vintage. In English, the name of this plant is Gum sisters. Gum because it's sticky, the leaf is sticky. And it has this aromatic, it's plant, so it's almost in the same type of aromas of eucalyptus or this area of aromas. So it's almost like I don't know if you have these chocolates in the US called After Eight. It has this mint aroma and palate. And so it's a wonderful wine with a lot of acidity, very well balanced. And I dare to say it's one of the best vintages, definitely one of the best vintage, the best vintage that we made since 2017. And I would put it at the same level as 94. Many considered 94 being one of the best vintages of the last century. But I would put it at the same level as 94, 45, or 27. So it's really a spectacular vintage that is ready to drink now. If you open the bottle now, you will feel this explosion of fruitiness. But you will have lots of tannin, but a very silky tannin structure. Very silky, very seductive tannic structure. And this wine is ready to drink, but if you leave it in your cellar for 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, or if you leave it for the next generations, the wine will actually improve in the bottle and will even be better. Obviously, with different types of aromas, it will start to evolve to secondary and tertiary aromas. But vintage port has one of these characteristics of all the great wines in the world, that has this ability to age for many, many decades. So I strongly recommend everybody to try the 2024s. They are exceptional. I think Ramos Pinto, I don't seem pretentious. Won't say it's the best, but it's definitely among the very best vintage ports that are in the market.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time today, George. We appreciate you joining us for the Wine.com Day webinar.
Thank you very much, Billy. And you are all invited to visit us here in Porto and in the Douro Valley.
All right, that was Jorge Rosas and Ramos Pinto. I hope everybody got really excited about port wine. I know I did. I definitely want to go check out some of the 2017 vintage as well as the 2024. But now let's go to the United States. Let's go over to the Anderson Valley and talk about Roederer Estate sparkling wine. Jean-Rémi, what can you tell me about one of these flagship estates in the Roederer portfolio?
Yeah, well, this is in fact our first connection to the United States of America. That was the first property outside of Europe that the sixth generation, Jean-Claude Rousseau, who was at the time at the helm, acquired and built from scratch. And this is quite the achievement, replicating the philosophy of of wine growing, of winemaking, with their know-how from Champagne-Louis-Roederer since 1776 to California, starting in 1982. So this is very similar. However, we want to feature the terroir of Anderson Valley. And today, Roederer Estates remains part of one of the top producer of domestic sparkling, one of the benchmark, and also beautiful property to visit. In fact, they revamped the tasting room recently. That's actually the sister of Frédéric Rousseau, who renovated the tasting room, which is quite beautiful to enjoy these delicious wines.
Yeah, for sure. I had the luxury of going up there just last year, and it is a beautiful place, and it's a very serene setting to be tasting out there just north of Sonoma. So great. Well, without any further introduction, here is Arnaud Weyrich from Roederer Estate. Hi, Arnaud. Thanks so much for joining us for the Wine.com Day webinar.
Thanks, Billy. Thanks for welcoming me on Wine.com.
Yeah, I'm really excited to share with our viewers today the story of the Roederer Estate here in Northern California. And it's definitely really a wonderful place, not only for the wines, but I also had the privilege of visiting last year, and it's just a very unique setting among Northern California wineries. So if you could share maybe a little bit about you and how you got to be working at the winery, and then we'll dive into the winery and the wines itself.
All right, absolutely. Yeah. So my name is Arnaud Weyrich. I'm the winemaker at Roederer Estate, and I've worked 28 years for the family in different sections of time. But I started in the 90s, 93 to 95. Left for 5 years and came back in 2000, and then took over from my predecessor, Michel Salk, in 2003. So I've been running the show as the head winemaker at Roederer Estate since 2003. And we are located in the Anderson Valley. So where is the Anderson Valley? Everybody asked that question. So it's a tiny appellation in Northern California in Mendocino County. So that's the county just north of Sonoma County. And we are coastal, so we are we picked that spot because it's actually close to the Pacific Ocean. It's pretty cold on that section of the world, meaning we have the marine layer of fog coming in and cooling down the valley. So those variations of maximum temperature to the minimum of the night can be up to 50 Fahrenheit. And those cold nights sometimes allow the acidity to be retained in the grapes. And if you make sparkling wine, acid is your friend, and you want to keep that as your crispness, freshness, that kind of keeps the wine alive, edgeworthiness, but also freshness of what makes a sparkling wine beautiful.
Yeah, certainly. And just to clarify, he did say 50 difference in Fahrenheit. It's not just 15. So that's a really big diurnal shift there.
Absolutely, yeah. 50 Fahrenheit creates that during the day you are easily in the 80s to 90s, and you can go in the 50s at night. So it's like it's can be pretty cool. So night picking, which I will do very soon during harvest, allows to keep those grapes fresh, and then so when you crush it, you have actually something that stays very clean, very pristine. There's a sense of cleanness when you get those grapes picked cool like that at night.
And then so Roederer as a company is known for owning much of the vineyards that it uses, or a higher percentage of the vineyards that it uses compared to a lot of the other well-known champagne houses. And then so they wanted to bring that over. Obviously they own, and you only work with estate fruit. And then it's 100%, or not 100%, but it's Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. Do you also use any Meunier, or are those the key varieties that you're working with from Champagne?
Well, you're right. So Roederer Estate, it says on the label. So there are two key words on the label, right? So we're owned by Champagne Roederer, a Champagne house that is 250 years old this year in 2026. And then when the family came to develop the estate in the Anderson Valley, it was to have the full control of what happens in your vineyards. How do you achieve that full control? Well, you create an estate where you have your own teams managing the vineyards, so you can call the shots of what you plant, what you farm, or when you pick, which create exactly the quality grapes that you want to make the one that you're looking for. which are Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, and a teeny bit of Pinot Meunier, but we've never been super happy with Pinot Meunier. So we had Pinot Meunier, until actually this year. There was a small block that we used for trial, and now it's gone. So I could say that now only have Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. And my blends are mostly, built on Chardonnay, more like 50 to 60%. So I'm over half of it is more on the Chardonnay side, which is a bit reversed from what happens in Champagne. It's to be built more on the black varieties. Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier usually, 50 to 30%, unless you are in the Blanc Montagne, des Blancs, Côte des Blancs, type of feel. So this is kind of like the style of, it's a blend. All of them are blend, and mostly on the Chardonnay side. So it's a matter of selection. This is also part of the thing that's very hard to explain, but the house of Roederer, because I've worked with them so long, they are extremely detail-oriented, and that fits very much who I am as well. It's, in how you take care of the vineyard, how you make the wine, how you make the selection. So all the selection, those details, it's actually how you craft the wine and make the brand be what it is. And then at Roederer in general, there is a high expectation of how the wines should be. And then if you don't like the wine, it's actually not selected to go in the blend, so it doesn't exist. So there's that super selection, even for the non-vintage wine. Not all the wines made the cut, and then if you go into the L'Hermitage, the Tête de Cuvée, there's even less, less lots that are selected. So this is also part of the DNA. We are super selective, from grapes to wine.
Yeah, perfect. Well, I think that's the perfect segue into the portfolio. Can you start maybe telling us about the two different non-vintage, and we'll move into L'Hermitage and your single vineyards?
So the two non-vintage are the Roederer Estate non-vintage, multi-vintage, if you know to follow the discussion, and Brut and Brut Rosé. The Roederer Estate Brut multi-vintage is 60% Chardonnay, 40% Pinot Noir, and about 10% of reserve wine from cask. I think 5 to 7 vintages in a given bottle. And the Rosé, it tends to be a little bit more on the Pinot side. It's usually around more the 50 to 55% Pinot Noir. There's a less reserve wine, usually around 8%. The part being the Chardonnay. And the Rosé is a Rosé by Red Wine Edition. So we have also vineyards on the estate that are farmed especially for the purpose of making red wine. So it means lower yields and a different, canopy management, also a little bit of the cluster management, less clumping, more, sun exposure, so that you can get a red wine that is very fruit forward, very pleasant, that is used then as a blending into your base wine that has just a teeny bit of color, and that's how you get that fruity character, but also the density, without never going into any astringency or bitterness. I think this is also kind of like the key character, key component of what the Rosé is about. It stays very much on the sparkling champagne, beautiful side, and never to that more Pinot hardness, skin content that could bring bitterness or astringency. Then I have a Tête de Cuvée, my premium blend called L'Hermitage. It's a super selection of wines from the estate. It's just a teeny bit more Chardonnay than Pinot Noir. It's a blend 50-50 of Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, to which there's about 4% of reserve wine added to the blend, just to give that little touch of the house style. Make it like a 52 Chardonnay, 48 Pinot Noir. And then one is aged in 5 years and beyond on the yeast, in order to create that very champagne, musty, creamy feel that makes it very classic and also very age-worthy. And in between of those two, it's something that I started making with the Harvest 2020, is a single vineyard selection. Because when I was making, when I am making, I'm still making it, when I'm making L'Hermitage, actually you taste all your lots and you feel that there is like the repeat offenders, the very good lots that you find over and over, that coming from the same sites. And I decided it was time for us to showcase some of those single vineyard selection as the best place to show a variety in a specific microclimate environment on the estate. And I started making two single vineyards, one called Clark, that's Pinot dominant, one's called Apple Alley, that is Chardonnay dominant. Different vineyards, about 2 miles apart from each other. different type of soil, different type of exposure, but both, very, very pretty in how they express themselves, in the site.
I'm wondering maybe if you could just share a little bit as we are wrapping up here, what you have seen kind of evolve and change over the past 26 plus years since you've been at the helm. How has maybe the Anderson Valley changed, or your approach as your vines have matured in the winery?
And I think, there's a San Francisco Chronicle article from many years ago that says like over the 200 years, nearly 200 years, they've been logging the number of events in San Francisco, because in San Francisco, fog is very important, right? It's very gloomy in summer, so people are counting the days of fog, right? And it has dropped by 30%. San Francisco is seeing more sun because fog events have dropped by 30%, since the year 50s. So it's happening all along the coast. We still have the fog, but you have less of it. So it tends to speed up a little bit that's maturity.
So I think also when you were mentioning there, L'Hermitage is a vintage cuvee, and I think actually the 2019 was one of the first to get a 100-point score from any publication for an American sparkling, which is really exciting. Can you share a little bit about maybe like some of the conditions in some recent vintages that might be available on the market right now?
Yes. Yeah, we were. Well, every year you do your best, right? So every year you do your best. You're always trying to do the best possible. So it's fantastic when you're a wine writer. Also things like this is outstanding. This is worth 100 points. So we were super happy when enthusiasts gave the L'Hermitage 2019 100 points. It's a very sexy wine. It's a very pleasant. It's it has all of the keywords that you like. Something that is just lingers. Outstanding. I'm currently on the vintage 2020. I just released it on vintage 2020, and on the single vineyard, I'm on the vintage 2021. And also they're all are around those the 3 to 5 years of aging time on the yeast, because this is what we like also. This is giving time on the wine to age, and time is a luxury. So if you can afford to age your wine in the yeast in the cellar, it's only developing more greatness.
Oh, that's so interesting. For the wines that were coming out now, the 20 and the 2021, were those vintages more foggy vintages, or were they a little bit sunnier ones?
Actually, the 2021, its hallmark was a small harvest. Was one of the smaller one of the last 10 years. So it was a pretty intense madman rush to kill the grapes, because if on top of it you have not a lot of yield, but you have a decent canopy, or the vines is just like a big solar panel, is going to create all of that sugar, and then not enough berries to bring it in. So suddenly things move quickly. So on those lower yield years, you tend to have more acid, because the acid you pick a little earlier in the season, and it shrinks the season. So 21 and 22 were somewhat of a smaller vintage, very compressed, very intense. 2020 was a bit more, I would say, classic. Even though when you talk of 2020, there's the stigma of Napa with those fires in Napa, but for us being coastal, actually we didn't suffer from any fires or any smoke events. So it was actually a good harvest, even though there was the COVID craziness around it. It was actually in the vineyard a decent vintage. Yeah. And then came 2023, where it was a very large vintage, cool vintage, rainy vintage, in winter. That was kind of like, a little bit the opposite of what 21 was. So 23 was a long harvest, was like, we just no rush, because you could just take your time. It was just so foggy, cool, and so forth. So in the span of like a few years, from 2020 to 2023, we moved from more intense short harvest to like a more cool, foggy, long harvest and plenty of grapes. It gives a sense of you feel more in control, because you can actually pick when you want. You can wait versus sometimes you just have to keep going, because otherwise you get overwhelmed.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to maybe getting a couple bottles of each of these vintages and trying to taste the weather. But
yeah, don't forget that single vineyard. That's This is a bottle of Apple Alley 2021. And then if you can actually, get a hand also on a bottle of L'Hermitage, this is, that's how the label looks like for the L'Hermitage wine. It looks classic and very classy label.
Well, excellent. Well, thank you so much, Arnaud, for your time today and for joining the Wine.com webinar. We really appreciate you and your partnership with Selling on Wine.com.
Absolutely. Thank you, and cheers.
All right. Well, that was Arnaud Weyrich from the Roederer Estate here in Anderson Valley. Very exciting, beautiful place. I hope everybody can not only taste the wines, but make the visit. And, that will wrap up our producer interviews for today. Thank you so much, Jean-Rémi, for organizing these conversations and for the partnership with Wine.com.
Thank you very much, Billy, for having me to this webinar. It was great to highlight some of the properties from Roederer collection imported by Maisons, Marques and Domaine. And thank you as well to Wine.com for the great partnership. Cheers.
All right, that will conclude our Wine.com Day webinar series. Thank you so much for everyone who was able to join today. And if you're able to join any of our other webinars this week as well, we had a great time sharing all of these suppliers with you and their great producers. We hope everybody enjoyed the series, and we will be back with more content both on Wine.com and more webinars. So thank you again. We appreciate everyone who are stewardship members and were able to join us on Tuesday. And for everyone who was just attending the webinar and a customer of Wine.com, we also appreciate you. So thank you again, and I hope you enjoyed this webinar series.